First up today, we have Ian Scoley. Ian is VP of Design and Innovation at Safran Cabin. An airline and design industry expert, Ian will examine the future of taxi hailing, showcasing Safran Cabin's groundbreaking work with Uber, and providing a snapshot of how we may have new additions to our skylines much sooner than any of us could have imagined.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ian Scoley, head of Safran Cabin Innovation and Design Studio, based in Huntington Beach, California. And this morning I'm talking to you from my home office, or the garden as I like to call it. I figured that since you're all cooped up inside the same as I am, I could take this opportunity to bore you to death for the next 15 minutes with a PowerPoint. So let's talk about the future of flight, shall we? Okay, well, let's get going. I'm going to start by giving you a bit of a heads up on what Safran does, or more specifically Safran Cabin. Safran itself is a huge organization, and Cabin's part of that organization. And Cabin's mission's pretty straightforward. I mean, we're all about commercial aerospace, but fundamentally here we're to enable better travel experiences, which means safety, comfort, reliability, and efficiency. And all the time we're overlaying those performance criteria on the brand identity and the missions of our customers and the airlines who fly. Safran is a huge corporation. Cabin itself is pretty substantial. As you can see here, there's 6 divisions covering everything from the floor-to-floor interiors to lavatories and galleys. We have a worldwide footprint with over 13,000 employees in 10 countries and a massive coverage within the aircraft supplier base. Along with our sister companies, Safran Seats and Safran Passenger Systems, we're responsible for pretty much everything inside the modern commercial airline. So if you've flown any time recently, chances are you've used some of our products somewhere or other. What I like most about Safran, though, is their incredibly forward-looking vision of the future. Very, very technology-led organization, very led technology company, progressively looking at better futures for our planet and the products and how we use them. That's really a key message for a design organization like ours. But that's about it. I'm not going to talk any more about airplanes. Let's talk about something a little bit more interesting, flying cars. Or as they're known, eVTOL in modern terminology. It's always a struggle to find out what they're called, but eVTOL appears to be the name that we've landed on. Electrical Vertical Takeoff and Landing Vehicles. And this is the stuff of science fiction. So why are we interested in working with eVTOLs? Well, for a start, they tick all the boxes for electric, autonomous and green operations, since these things are going to be used in urban environments using complete battery power. Nice thing for us, they stretch us beyond our current limits. The world of airline cabin hasn't really changed since the late 50s when Boeing introduced the 707. And ever since that time, we've been working within a pressurized cylinder at 36,000 feet. The beauty of eVTOL is it's beholden to none of those rules. There's no specifications to obey, there's no experts currently established, and there's no regulations to abide by. This is all virgin territory, brand new area for us to establish a whole new set of design criteria. Uber, you'll have seen the name Uber around here. Why did we decide to work with Uber? There's over 200 individual eVTOL companies out there at the moment building amazing vehicles, from single-seaters to multi-seaters to commuting vehicles to urban taxis, full spectrum. Very few of them are going to be successful because this is a huge technology challenge. Now, Uber has come to the party and they have a clear vision and a massive vision for the future need of these vehicles. Of course, it's based off their network of ground vehicles, which gives them a head start on understanding how people move in urban environments. But this is projected into a huge scale vision, which is looking at tens of thousands of these urban eVTOL vehicles. And what's beautiful about Uber is they're not planning to build anything. They own the system, they own the network. But what they want to do is to establish a common user experience across all of their future vehicles. So the work that we did with Uber was to develop and establish what we call a common reference model. Why else do we like working with Uber? Well, really, the number one factor has to be that they're just hugely customer focused. This is all about passenger experience for them, top to bottom journey value. So we loved working with those guys. Over and above that, it gave us an opportunity to stretch our realm of expertise beyond the usual safe, intuitive, efficient, comfortable environment of an airplane interior. The Uber mission is remarkable. It's basically urban pooled on-demand transportation, which means these vehicles are running 12 to 18 hours a day. They will have a mission of around 8 minutes. They will pick up 4 strangers in a cab and fly them from one destination to another with a 5-minute turnaround in a seamless multimodal journey using their ground vehicles as well. So basically what it means is if I want to travel from here, Huntington Beach, to LAX, for example, I can call an Uber now and they will send me a car. And depending on what time of day it is, I could be stuck on the 405 for an hour and a half, or it could take me 35 minutes. What they do with the eVTOLs is they'll assess the journey conditions. If the ground traffic is too severe, they would basically pick you up in a car, take you to a vertiport, put you on board an eVTOL for a short hop to another vertiport, into another car, and then to LAX. So this is what I mean by multimodal journeys, and they have the infrastructure and network to make this work. Very exciting. But it drives a lot of new challenges. And basically what we put together with Uber was what we call the mission-driven cabin. So I'm going to dive into this for a few minutes and tell you a little bit about how that went together. We basically looked at this as an optimization of values across the full mission parameters. And for us, that meant the optimization of the vehicle, optimization of its ground operations, and optimization of its customer experience, which is linked to the rest of the multimodal transport experience. Let's start with the vehicle. These vehicles are scientifically on the edge of feasibility. Electrical vertical takeoff vehicles use an awful lot of power, which means that when they get to their altitude and transfer into horizontal flight, they have to be ridiculously efficient aerodynamically. Otherwise, the math just doesn't work. There simply isn't enough battery power to keep them in the air for the missions. So what that means is that we really have to look very critically at the size and cross-section of the vehicle. 1 extra inch of extra diameter on the fuselage has a catastrophic impact on the vehicle size and weight. So what we want to try and do is to keep the size, the cross-section of the vehicle, minimized as close as possible so that we can make it aerodynamically efficient. Now, when we started the game, this was what Uber gave us. This was their early common reference model, this torpedo-shaped thing, and you see it's got 4 seats in tandem. This was devised by their aerodynamics team. And elegant as it is, it's pretty rubbish for passengers, since it's almost impossible to get in and out of. You'd need 8 doors, ridiculous vehicle. So we had to go through a process of optimizing this. So on the screen at the moment, what you can see is the aerodynamicist view of what the vehicle ought to be. Unfortunately, that's juxtaposed to what the marketing department thought it ought to be. They definitely saw this large campfire seating arrangement, huge amounts of space, and clearly this thing was never going to fly. So we started optimizing. Uber basically settled around a sort of family SUV size. We reckon that could get pushed an awful lot tighter based on what economy passengers are used to flying within airplanes. And then through the process, we arrived at a comfortable medium which kept everybody happy. We also changed the fuselage section, as you can see, giving the passengers a little bit more headroom, but still keeping that cross-section minimal. This balance was achieved through a rapid series of prototypes. This is a bit of a bizarre image, actually, because it's a virtual reality representation of the 7 physical mock-ups we built to finally come up with the interior seating definition for the vehicle. But this brought us to our ultimate balance. So let's look at operations for a moment. The ground operations of this vehicle, again, are ridiculously critical. It needs to be in the air as often as possible. Its optimum mission time is 8 to 15 minutes. It means it has 5 minutes to turn around on the ground. So in 5 minutes, we have to get 4 complete strangers with their luggage on and off the vehicle, safely on the tarmac of the landing field. So again, we put the mock-up and prototypes to work here. We tested multiple seating arrangements, multiple layouts, multiple spacings, different door sizes, and we run hundreds of user testings to get the most user-friendly, easy way of getting people on board. And what it means is we ended up with 3 zones inside the cabin. The 2 zones on the left are for the passengers. The 3rd zone on the right is for the luggage, since every passenger is responsible for bringing their own bag on the aircraft. Uber originally looked at a campfire seating arrangement, which means passengers facing forward and aft. It gives a beautiful opening to the vehicle, a very welcoming approach, but then you have strangers banging knees when they're sitting face to face, and also it's rather uncomfortable when you're trying to back out of the vehicle to disembark. So we flipped the seats the other way around. We went front to front, which is a little bit less friendly for that entrance area, and it also closes off the luggage area to the back. So we flipped the door configuration, opened up the massive barn doors to give us that access to the back space, and we also angled the seats away from each other, what we call the herring bench, which gives a little bit of privacy, and the wedge in between the 2 seats is a little couch which allows passengers to scoot from one side to the other when they're boarding. So it's super easy to get on the aircraft. And this is the baby with the doors opening. This is the welcoming view passengers would get as they walk across the tarmac to the vehicle. Now, modular design and robust materials. I mentioned earlier on that this is a reference model for Uber. Ultimately, there are going to be multiple aircraft manufacturers building these vehicles, but to have continuity of experience for the passengers, we look to modularity in order to define some common user interface points, the seats, the handles, the touch points that could be used from one vehicle to another without compromising the aerodynamic structure of the vehicle. And likewise, although many of our visions are of the Starship Enterprise for vehicles like this, the reality of its operations are that it's going to be run more like a New York cab, very heavily used by a very, very broad cross-section of people in all sorts of conditions. So robustness of materials and durability were a huge part in designing the interior of the vehicle. Let's look at optimizing the experience for the passenger, because at the end of the day, this is the most important part of it. Uber are very, very heavy on safety, and they have this feature that they call Safety Blue. Sometimes Safety Blue is an implied feature, like a lighting condition that tells you something's going to change, so be aware. Sometimes they're hard points like grab handles or safety belts, that kind of things that are purely linked to safety and security. So Safety Blue is a clear point in the interior of this, along with a lot of other touch points and accessibility aids that let people get on and off and fly safely. The nice thing about the interior is that we've built the seat around existing technology from our sister company, Safran Seats, who are a world leader in helicopter seats. The certification for these seats is very similar to what we expect eVTOL to be. So the DNA of those helicopter seats has gone into the eVTOL seat, which means we have a tried and tested formula for the performance of these critical interior parts. And that's it, in summary, our mission-driven cabin. I have to say this was one of the most rewarding projects my team's ever worked on. From start to finish, it was about 6 months, from the early concepts down to final mock-up that was delivered for the Uber Symposium a year ago in Washington, D.C. I want to give you a couple of key takeaways from the project as well, because this was really important for us. Firstly, in terms of collaboration, I've never really worked with a team or with a group of people with such a profitable way of working. Uber had a very, very clear vision and a very clear value on focus. And what was beautiful about the partnerships, both Safran and Uber shared those values, and we had complementary skill sets that made the whole thing gel and come together. The way of working was exceptional. Within our design studio, we prototype. We test as much as we can. We have a mantra which is basically fail early, fail cheap, and learn. So this is what we do. We test, and make sure that it's really what it needs to be. Develop a deep understanding of that engagement and use a small dedicated team to do it. And finally, really for top-level alignment, you have to create a business pull. This cannot be an innovation push. You have to have the business and the customer pulling to make things happen. So once again, this was a fabulous project. I'm going to leave you now to the rest of the show and finish with a short video that shows basically how this process worked for you. I hope you all stay safe, and thank you for joining me.
The partnership with Uber Elevate has been fantastic. Everybody has collaborated, added new and additional ideas, and we've been able to take those ideas and turn them into something that's really quite fantastic.
I don't think I've ever seen two teams come together like this before.
And we haven't seen anything this profound in quite some time.
The Uber team and our development team here have just been sparking each other.
Yeah, this was a completely new approach to a brief for a cabin because it's not traditional tube, it's something completely new. It's reissuing a brief for a new way of transporting people.
Safran Design and Innovation Studio is really where the magic happens for us. And it's where we take concepts or early design ideas and turning them into reality.
Our studio here in Safran Cabin is a very collaborative environment.
There's a lot of design agencies out there, there's a lot of engineering organizations, but to have that research and development facility within a manufacturing organization like Safran is just super powerful.
Here at Safran Cabin, we have the talent and the tools to bring any concept to life.
We get to start with a blank slate, and we can create environments and fundamentally build this cabin together through many iterations, try things that maybe you wouldn't think of.
So taking the high-level requirements of the turnaround time and the 4 people on board and the 8-minute flight, we had to first really understand how large the vehicle was.
We had 6 full-scale mock-ups. There was multiple iterations within each one of those, whether it was the seat or the liner or the window positioning.
So for us, prototyping and building the thing was just a natural progression to get into it and understand how human beings have to interact with it.
I think Uber was very instrumental in helping us do that as well. They didn't say, no, this is what you have to do. They said, oh, where are we going? Let's go there together.
I think what Uber really educated us on is the idea of movement and how their vision of how you move people and goods and services around is really the global picture that we're looking at. How do you take your luggage out of the car and bring it up to the aircraft and put it in? How do you interact with your personal devices or a coffee that you have in your hand that you're able to put in a cup holder in the car, but what do you do in the aircraft? You have 4 people pulling in a vehicle for an 8-minute flight that has to turn around in 5 minutes. And keeping them comfortable and safe along their journey really drove a lot of the design decisions once we get into the actual process of building the vehicle.
We don't want any excess weight, any excess cost, anything to take up space it doesn't need to. But that doesn't mean it's not purpose-built for the mission. The mission requires safety, it requires a comfortable user experience, and it requires a seamlessness of all the interactions. And so while the cabin may be minimal in some ways, it's absolutely purpose-built to the mission, and I think that's the important part.
This is a flight experience for 4 strangers, but you don't want to start closing it off and making it private and putting privacy dividers up. Again, it's cost and weight. So the herringbone is just a nice subtle way of turning your shoulder away from the person next to you. You don't feel so intruded. And it faces you out to the window so you can enjoy that amazing view at 1,500 feet, which is just going to be spectacular.
We're looking for complete optimization because Uber's building an ecosystem where the entire aviation and transportation community can thrive together. The energy around it makes this inevitable.
Safran is absolutely committed to developing and building and then producing engines and other equipment to go on the aircraft, including a beautiful cabin that we've created for Uber Elevate.
We will see this, and we'll see it fairly soon.
This is like the origins of aerospace again. There's nothing like this has happened for decades, so it's very exciting.
This is only the beginning.